Hi, I hope this is okay. Um, I can't remember how many times I've been at a job and I've heard people say, there's um, tasks that need to be done and there's various crews that work on different things. I can't remember how many times I've heard it said, well, they left this material out, so we shouldn't clean up after their mess. Or they wouldn't do that for us, so we shouldn't do it for them. You know, all kinds of work settings that I've had in my life, um, same thing. And really, what it boils down to is I always thought, are we our own person, or are we what others make us? Do we act, or do we react to somebody else's act? Moral leadership is, I would define, as a true independence. When you aren't dependent on the actions or the failures or whatever of others, but that you perform your duty or you live your life independent to the best of your ability of what others do or even what others think or say. Moral leadership is alive, proactive, positive, forward. The lack of moral leadership, the reactionary mind, maybe the primitive instinct of fight or flight, is basically, in practice, the opposite of moral leadership. To try to give you some better examples, I'm actually going to reference the Bible, because the person of Jesus, in the New Testament, I think touches a lot on moral leadership, what I would call moral leadership. Obviously, it's not called that itself in the book, but Jesus gives some solid examples that I think are timeless representations of what I'm trying to say. The first one I've written down here comes in the Gospel of Matthew, Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 5, verse 43, it begins in. And Jesus is basically he's always with his disciples, but he's lecturing them on various things. One of the things he says is, you have heard it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And I take it to mean, this translation is the New Revised Standard Version. By the way, I highly recommend this version. It's got all kinds of resources contained in it. It has the Apocrypha, or the books that aren't included in much of the standard canon of Scripture. It's just got really cool footnotes, give you context, historical context, stuff like that. The New Revised Standard Version. This is called the New Oxford Annotated Bible. the fully revised 4th edition. I'm a huge fan of this. But anyway, so I take the word, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. I think persecute would mean any form of aggression, any form of attack, verbal or otherwise, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He goes on. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and the good, and sends rains on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? You've already got your reward. The reward itself has been paid because they love you, they reciprocate. But if you go the extra mile, another reference to Jesus, if you go the extra mile and love those who don't love you or treat people with respect who don't, that's on you. That's your good. It doesn't matter what the other person's doing or what they don't do. The second example comes in Matthew chapter 18, verse 21. Let me flip through it here. Okay. So Peter comes up to Jesus, the disciple Peter, and he says, Then Peter came and said to him, Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times? Asked Peter. Jesus said to him, Not 7 times, but I tell you, 77 times. Okay, you could take this as like literal. Like, okay, Jesus, I forgave this guy 1 time, he's got 76 more times. I think the point is that Jesus is saying forgive indefinitely. Because, for a couple reasons. I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget it. To forgive someone is to surrender to God, not to the evil that they've done. So even when the ego wants to hang on to the pain, to let go of the pain and give it to the universe, to give it to God, to let go of it is to deprive it of its power. And that's your power. To not forgive deprives you of that power. So that's why it's important. It's a surrender so as to gain the independence of yourself and to preserve your own integrity, irrespective of others. Evil will look for another way to cause damage through your hatred, animosity, or bitterness. Evil spreads itself like a virus, transitioning from one person to the next. It infects one person. A person hurts someone. That person being hurt passes the hurt to someone else. And then so on and so on. They pass it to them. They pass it to them. This person becomes bitter. They become a jerk. And they just implode into a kind of bitter hatred for everything. So that's how evil breeds. That's how it continues to propagate itself, is through the hurt that it causes. So when you don't forgive and when you hold grudges, you're enabling that mechanism to continue. So evil is a kind, or forgiveness is a kind of self-liberation. Because it's not our job anyway to rectify. It's not our job to be like a mirror, but to be like a light. It's not our job to do what others do, but to do what we would do anyway. It's like the example at work. No, they didn't clean up their mess after they left. But are we them? Am I them? It's my own standard. It's the same with forgiveness, in principle. It's the same. It's independence, moral leadership. Someone's got to lead. If everyone's just doing what everyone else is doing, back and forth, it will all end in ruin. Because no one takes the leadership to let go. And that's the importance of it. Never mind what others do. What do you do? What do I do? That's the standard, the invisible, unseen standard, which in faith we give our allegiance to, and we thereby live accordingly, or try to. It more than definitely can be hard at times to let go and forgive. I know it can be hard, but I tell you, the acid which eats without forgiveness is worse in the end. You deserve the freedom from whatever caused you to hate the world or to be hurt. You deserve the freedom. You're entitled to that freedom by God themselves. I want to say this multiple times, and I think I will, but I'll say it here also. If God were to desire anything for us, it is freedom. And a big part of that freedom is the ability to let go, to forgive. It preserves our own freedom.